In the last video, we created the register module, controller and service for the registration flow in our backend. In this video, we'll map the input values needed for the registration in the backend and get them from the HTTP request. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel in order to follow the development of this real app using the Ionic framework and NestJS framework. Looking at the register page of our app, we can see that we have a form with multiple inputs. When the user clicks on the register button, we should get the values of that form and send them to the backend, so the registration can happen and these values can be saved in the database. In the front-end code, we already have mapped the structure that should be sent to the backend in order to complete the registration flow. You can see this structure here in the user register class. Let's take the same model to our backend. To do this, we'll create a new folder in our module called model. Inside of it, we'll create a new file called userregister.ts. Here, we will export a class called userRegister. This class has a name as a string, an email as a string, a password as a string, and a phone as a string. We also need to map the address details. I'll create a new file called address.ts. Here I'll export a class called address. This class has an address as a string, a number as a string, a neighborhood as a string, a complement as a string, a zip code as a string, a state as a string, and a city as a string. Now I'll go back to my user register class and add to it a new property called address of the type address we just created. Cool, now let's go to the postman and send to the backend some data that will correspond to that model I just created. To do this, I'll go to the body tab and select the raw input with a JSON type. Now I'll just paste the values that some front end could send to our backend. If I make a call to our backend, we still have the same response, which is the user registered string. Now let's find how we can get access to that JSON input we are sending in the body of our HTTP request. To do this, we can define that our register function receives the body as a parameter by using the body decorator. Now we need to declare that the body will be passed to the user register parameter, which is of the type user register. By doing this, we get access to the body of our HTTP request and put it inside of the user register property. NestJS gives us other decorators that allow us to get access to other elements of the request, as the query decorator, which allows us to get the URL query parameters of the request, and the param decorator, which allows us to get access to the URL parameters of the request. We don't need those decorators yet, so let's focus on the body. Now that we have access to the body of the HTTP request, let's return it as a response to this API call so we can see that this works. Now save it, go back to Postman, and make another call to the backend. You can see that after those changes, we really got access to the body of our API call inside of our backend. Cool, but what if someone sends to the backend an invalid email? Or a password that is too short? Or the phone number as empty? That kind of input shouldn't be allowed and our backend should return an error response, but for now it still returns a success response. In the next video, we'll find a way to validate the data sent by the client to the backend, and in case that data is not valid, the backend will respond with an error. Don't forget to subscribe to follow the development of this real app using the Ionic and NestJS frameworks, and see you on the next video.